Welcome back to the Garden Hutch. Today we're going to discuss June in your garden. Let's get going. June is easily one of the busiest months for us gardeners. There's so much to do. The weather's starting to warm up. It's starting to get hot. So in this video, what we're going to discuss a few vegetables that you can still plant in the month of June. We're going to discuss some chores that you need to make sure that are accomplished during the month of June. And then lastly, we're going to discuss a few things that you need to make sure you're aware of in the month of June when you're walking through your garden. Before we get to all of that though, I just wanted to ask, if you're watching these videos and you enjoy them, if you could do me a solid and just subscribe to the channel. It's free for you folks, but it goes a long way for us. So with that out of the way, let's take a look at some of these vegetables we can plant in the month of June. So depending on where you live, that's going to have a lot to do with what you can plant for right now. So if you live in a really cool climate, you might be able to plant anything. In our zone, I would stay away from things like lettuce or beets or carrots, anything that has a chance to bolt whenever it gets hot. But some of the things that you can plant are your summer squashes, and you can see a bunch of those behind us. You can plant yellow squashes, zucchini, any of those things will do well. If you have the chance though, I recommend maybe starting them in a greenhouse, getting them a couple inches tall before you put them in the ground. If you can get those started and then put them in the warm soil, they are going to take off. Before the end of the month, you're going to probably end up having a bunch of squash available to you. You could also start your winter squashes if you would like. Again, depending on your zone, you may not get as many of them, but you'll still get a significant crop regardless of where you're at. The thing that we like the most are beans. We plant a lot of beans during the month of June, and we'll go over the reason for that as this video goes along. Another thing that I wanted to show you all real quick are sweet potatoes. So let's take a look at those real quick. So this is the first year that we've decided to grow sweet potatoes. So the thing I wanted to go over with sweet potatoes are, you can see how bushy these guys are getting now. So in the last couple, I would say in the last week or so, these things have tripled in size since the temperatures have consistently been above 80 degrees. But the trick that, as a novice, that I didn't realize was the soil temperature plays a much bigger role in our sweet potatoes than what I was anticipating. Now that our soil temperatures have gotten warmer, these sweet potatoes are going crazy. So the reason I bring this up is, going forward, even here in zone 7B, I will not plant sweet potatoes until June 1st. So I wanted to throw that in here so you all could see and kind of learn from what we're doing. We put these in at the 1st of May, and we lost several of them because the weather was just not accommodating. So we put in like 15 of our sweet potatoes, and we only have 10 left. So the reason that's a big deal is because the place we get all of our stuff from, Urban Farmer, they have been nothing but reliable for us. And when I lost the sweet potatoes, I was wondering what was going on, and I was under the assumption it had to be user error on my part, and come to find out it is. Sweet potatoes need to be put in whenever the ground warms up considerably. So again, my number one thing to plant in June for zone 7B are sweet potatoes. June is full of chores to get done in the garden. So all of the basic chores that we have covered in all of our previous videos, and I'll put the one for May up here. But in addition to that, there are several new things that need to be accomplished in the month of May to make sure that you and your family have the crop that you're going to want to help sustain you through the summer and hopefully into the winter. Now, the first chore that I wanted to discuss is something that I've preached here on our channel for a little while now, but tomatoes. Our tomatoes at this point of the year, going into the 1st of June, we need to make sure that we've taken the suckers off of the bottom, which is just trimming them up, and stake them. The reason for this is tomatoes are going to be top heavy when they get all of their fruit here at the end of this month into early July, and if you have a storm or wind or anything, it can have a devastating effect. And even if not, even if you just have large fruit, they can break the limbs off, and then you'll never have a chance to eat those fruit because they won't ripen on the vine. I suppose you could take them inside, but what's the point in growing your own tomatoes if you are ripening them indoors? So if you haven't before, I've left this on here just in case folks don't know how to find a sucker on a tomato plant. All you have to do here is, you can see what we're going to do is we're going to go down here to the stem and we're going to follow it up. And as we follow it up, you can see how this is the main stem. And when you go up, you can see up here, the main stem, it has these flowers coming off of it. So that means this little fella right here that's coming out of this crotch, that is right there, that's the sucker. So all you do is you just take your little loppers and you'll trim them off right there. So I left this here just to kind of show everybody, and I'll cut this out once we're done with this video. Also, I highly recommend, as you're tying up your tomato plants, I don't like to tie the tops. I like to go, whenever I did this one yesterday morning, you know, I give it about, I don't know, 8 to 12 inches from the top. And the reason is I like to allow the tops of these tomato plants to sort of swivel with the sun, because at our property, the sun's going to move from this side over to this side. And it's kind of cool, and it's beneficial for the plant to kind of watch the head, the top of those plants kind of swivel with the sun as the day goes along. The second chore that I would like to discuss with you folks today that we need to accomplish in June is making sure that our trellising plants are actually growing on the trellises that you've built for them. So if you've just started, of course, your plants are going to be a little shorter than ours, but these have been in here for a few weeks now, so you can see that they're naturally kind of growing up the side of this. The thing of it is they don't want to do this on their own. These down here wanted to sprawl on the ground. And these cucumbers over here, they wanted to grow into our deal. In fact, you can see this guy right down there is a good example of a cucumber that needs to be teased into their trellis. So what we do is, as they go, we'll find like something like this that's a little bushy, and all you have to do is just take it, tease it back up onto the trellis. And cucumbers specifically, and squash, I suppose, they're really easy to do that, because all you have to do is take, you can see how broad those leaves are. All you can do is just take it and tuck one of them back here on the lattice on the back side of it. And whenever the sun comes, it's going to naturally want to grow up into that sun. So it'll put off a little tendril. That tendril will grab onto your lattice, and then it'll naturally start growing up. Something, if you're a new gardener, to keep an eye on when you do this, though, you do not want to ignore this during this time of year for more than a day or two, because it can totally grab onto something. If you have, like in our other bed, we're growing our cucumbers and tomatoes in the same bed. If you start getting those tendrils caught up in the wrong thing or on another plant, it can either choke that plant out, or it can damage that plant whenever you go to move it. So this is something that is an ongoing thing for most of June. And depending on your growing season, you may also be combating this, teasing your plants onto the trellises through a bit of July as well. But in the end, as far as the production that you'll get from your vegetables, it is well worth your time and effort to make sure your plants are growing on their trellis. Now is also a great time, if you have not, to begin your fertilizing regimen. Now, here on the homestead, the way we do ours is, as soon as the flowers begin, we add that plant to our fertilizer routine. So every 2 weeks, I go through and I fertilize, and I just have a list of flowers that are blooming or putting off fruit, and those are the ones that I fertilize. The reason that we take the time to do it this way is because whenever the plants start fertilizing, a lot of times that's whenever they're going to start using the most of the micronutrients from the soil. They need a lot of little trace elements, that sort of stuff, to go from flower to vegetables themselves. If we can give them a little boost, right? So we don't use a real heavy fertilizer either, though. We use a real mild fish emulsion, and we mix it at about half strength. But what that does is it ensures that the flowers are healthy and that it has everything it needs to move from that flower to fruit stage. You can use whatever fertilizer you want. Again, we use the mild fertilizer, and the reason for that is I don't want to try to put too many chemicals that I don't need into my soil. I also want to avoid the possibility of burning the roots or having the fertilizer mix a little too hot and kill the soil bacteria, which is a real possibility in some of your chemical fertilizers. Another thing that's important to take care of in June is to make sure that we remove our cool weather crops. Now you can see this one right here, it has started to bolt, and you can tell that it started to bolt because of the tops of the leaves here. They no longer are having the big edible leaves like they were. See how big that leaf is right there compared to how these are coming off, and they're kind of scraggly. You'll also see at the base of these, the stems will start getting super elongated, and soon what's going to happen is there's going to be a stem that's going to come from the top of this. That's where it gets the term bolting. It'll come straight up and it'll have a little leaf sac on it. The problem is this lettuce right here is going to get way bigger than it normally would be before this, before it starts bolting, and it's going to start shading things out. Not only that, it's going to pull more nutrients to feed its progeny, and you want those nutrients for the rest of your plant. So again, we want to make sure that we take this stuff out, and either in this bed, for example, because of the size of the kale and the peppers behind it, we don't need to replace it with anything. But if you look over here, we're going to be taking, you can see this guy really needs to come out. The leaves are starting to come off. We had a salad from this guy not too long ago, and the leaves are still tasty, but you can tell that it's getting close there. If you look at the bottom, you can see the stalks are also, the base of it is starting to get a little taller than usual as well. So anyway, so when we remove these right here, then we'll start replacing them, and we'll go over that here in a second. But it's really important to go ahead and get these things out of your gardens. Unless, let me put one caveat there. Let's say that you're saving your own seeds. If that's the case, then it's perfectly acceptable to have a spot to where you want to let your lettuce or whatever it might be go to seed and do that. But the reason I say it's important to get them out is because you don't want these things depleting your soil for something that you're not going to use. So if you do leave them in there, just make sure that you have a plan to collect the seeds, you keep on top of them, that sort of stuff. If not, you're just kind of wasting yourself time and money in the future, allowing these things to deplete all of your soil. Just a few more chores that I wanted to kind of mention as we go. It's super important to have a watering system set up, and I would test it early rather than later. Here in Zone 7B, it's going to start hitting triple digits relatively fast. In fact, in May, we had a few days where the heat index was up to triple digits, but usually towards the end of June, we start getting really close to triple digits, and that's not the heat index, that's the real temperature. So anytime that it's over 90 degrees, it is really important that you check your soil moisture levels. The last thing that you want to do is have all your plants wilting, no rain in sight, and have no idea how you're going to get water to your plants. By that point, whenever you hit your garden center, everybody else is probably going to be ahead of you, and you're just going to have to make do with what's left. Do yourself a favor, make that plan now, and you'll thank me for it later. Another thing that we're going to have to do, and this is something I hate doing, I've hated doing it, I've mentioned in every one of my videos, but it's just part of gardening, is you have to start weeding. The reason being is right now, not only are your vegetables in that stage where they're ready to grow, right? The soil temperatures are up, they're fixing to start putting their fruit off. It's the exact same scenario for many of the weeds that you're going to find in your garden bed. If we take the time during the month of June to remove these pesky weeds from our garden, a lot of times you can prevent them from putting down seed. And we all know what happens once these weeds start going to seed. It is a pain in the rear end to get rid of them after that point, because that one just turned into 25 or 30, and then if you neglect them again, next thing you know, you're just growing a whole bed of henbit or whatever the case may be. So do yourself a favor, just get outside and do it. A lot of times I'll just turn on the radio. I'm kind of a sports geek, so I'll turn on ESPN radio or something. If you enjoy music, you can do that too. Talk show, whatever you like to do, podcasts, just get one of those, maybe once a week, get an hour of entertainment lined up for your audio pleasure. Go outside, start pulling those little critters out of your garden, and it will pay off in the end in your yield from your vegetables. I almost forgot, I wanted to wrap this all into one chore. So as you're pulling out your winter crops and you're observing your garden, you may find some areas of opportunity like we did here around our eggplant. What we like to do is we like to go through our entire garden here in June when everything's had a chance to kind of spread out. We have an idea of the space that we've allocated to our plants and what's going to be left. These right here are all just green bush beans. So the way that we like to handle our space, our open spaces, we put beans in there. Another thing that we do is, as we showed earlier, where we're going to remove the lettuces and our cold weather stuff, we also put beans in those open areas as well. One of the things I like to say about June is the month where we move from preparedness to caring. So with that in mind, there's a few things when we care for the garden that we really need to pay attention to. Earlier, I made a video on what to look for when we do our daily garden inspection. I'll put that up here for anybody who hadn't seen it yet. But one of the things in June that is most important are bugs. Now, you're gonna have a lot of bugs. No matter where you live at, there are gonna be bugs that are gonna come out for your vegetables in the month of June. Here in Zone 7B, we have bugs all the time. One right there, in fact. And it's just something that we've kind of learned to live with. Over time, gardeners have learned how to take care of them. We use a lot of neem oil in our gardens, you know, for our garden pests. We also use them for our molds and mildews. But specifically in June, the things that I like to keep an eye out for are the squash bug, which not only, you know, we call it the squash bug because predominantly it will affect your squash. It'll live under the plants, it'll live around the stems, that sort of stuff of your squash. It'll bite your fruit, won't be good. It can also bite your tomatoes, all kinds of stuff. So be on the lookout. It's a nasty little critter. You're going to want to take care of it sooner rather than later. You can use diatomaceous earth to dust if they're on the soil, or you can spray with neem oil on the bottom side of the leaves, and that'll take care of the issue. The other big thing for us, at least here on the homestead, are the hornworms that attack our tomatoes. These things are the worst, right? If you don't go out and do your garden inspection daily, they can take a plant out in a whole day. Like if you don't check it from morning till night, you know, you go out Tuesday morning and check it and you're not back in the garden until Thursday morning. If you had an outbreak of hornworms, you may not have any tomatoes left. Do yourself a favor, get rid of these little dudes. They're hard to find sometimes because they're the same color. You know, what you can usually do is you can just kind of track them from the stem down to where they are. And what we do with ours, we feed them to the chickens. Some people don't like touching them, and if that's the case, just put on some gloves and you can take them, chunk them into a bowl of water with a little dishwashing liquid in it, and that'll kill them. However you decide to do it, just do yourself and your tomatoes a favor and make sure you take care of those hornworms. June is also a big month for powdery mildew because it gets so humid in our area. We get a lot of rain during the first of the month, and then it may go for a little while without it. Also, because we're still kind of in the developmental stage for our gardens, we do a lot of top-down watering. I recommend doing irrigation when you can, and that's what we'll go to when everything is established. But right now we're using a top-down irrigation system, and that can lead to powdery mildew as well. So just make sure that you have neem oil on hand. It might be a good idea to add like a small spray bottle of neem oil to your morning routine when you come out to do your garden inspection, just so you know if there's a little bit of infestation or whatever, you can handle it there until it turns into a big problem. But those are kind of the things to look out for during the month of June. And as always, for you folks that have made it to this end of the video, I just want to say thank you. We appreciate you folks. If you have not, please consider subscribing to the channel. As I said earlier, it's free for you. It goes a long way for us. If you enjoyed this video, consider giving it a like. Until next time, I hope that you folks take care of yourselves. Peace.